So, hi everyone, thanks for coming along to hear this discussion. I'm Dr. Alfie Tiley. I'm a data scientist at the Data Lab, and I'll be hosting the discussion tonight and facilitating lovely information coming out of our panelists here. I'll introduce our panelists in a second, but just for a bit of context and to set the scene, we're talking about AI in the financial sector. And we're going to discuss the opportunities that might arise from it and also the challenges that might come with it. But just as a bit of context, AI has really impacted the financial industry in the last 4 to 5 decades, really. And the current is widespread, and the seeds for that were sown, at the beginning of the last century, really, with statistical modeling, which was used for assessing stocks, and then in the 1960s, you started to see Bayesian statistics come into decisions today, in, for example, the work of quantitative analysts in finance. And what we'd probably call AI now started to the 90s, and then later machine learning that we would be more familiar with today. From around the 1990s to the early noughties, you start seeing algorithmic trading gain prominence. That's being applied in areas like portfolio management, pricing, trading strategies, that kind of thing. And then from sort of 2010 onwards, you start seeing the proliferation of big data and deep learning techniques, and they're used in things like fraud detection, credit scoring, that kind of thing. Obviously, in the present day, it's very widespread in the financial sector. Everything from fraud detection, risk assessment, algorithmic trading, as I said, customer service and advice, and we'll talk about chatbots tonight as well, and natural language processing and sentiment analysis. Tonight we're going to really focus on the current of AI and the current challenges and opportunities, and then also take a look to the future, how things might develop and how things might be employed in the future, and also touch on things like the ethics and governance that might come along with that as well. So obviously you're different from these guys tonight. So we have Ewan, machine learning lead in data science and innovation at NatWest, where his team develops AI-driven products and services for use across the bank. Before joining NatWest, Ewan was founder and CEO of Anomalous, which is an AI startup that developed automated inspection processes for the aerospace industry. And Ewan has a PhD in engineering science from the University of Oxford and was previously an assistant professor at the University of Glasgow. Say hello and welcome, Ewan. And then sat next to Ewan is Vicky Byrom, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Zumo Money. Vicky has over 20 years of experience delivering analytics projects across both private and public sectors, enabling companies to effectively use their data to make better decisions. She currently is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for the crypto wallet app Zumo, previously headed up the data function within fintech scale-up Modulr, and cut her data teeth working in a variety of data-related roles in NW. She won the Data IQ Award 2019 for Data Analytics Leader of the Year, when she led the multi-award winning advanced analytics practice for Merkle UK, and was a member of the AI steering committee for the Scottish Government that developed Scotland's first AI strategy. Welcome, Vicky. Craig Clark, Director of Product Agent. Craig works closely within the wider NatWest group to deliver a market-leading proposition for small business owners, helping them to stay in control of their finances as the industry moves towards making tax digital and embracing the full potential of open finance. Before joining Free Agent, Craig worked within the geosciences domain, building from technology startup through to the commercial deployment of industry-first detection and data analysis methodologies. Welcome, Craig. Okay, so to start off with, if we can just each of you just say hello in your own words, introduce yourself. If I've missed anything, feel free to add that. And how about tell us what your current work and how does AI present in your day-to-day work lives? So you're holding the mic here, and so you may as well start there.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Alfie.
No problem.
And thank you very much for the invite to be here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about the work that we're doing within NatWest and how it impacts the world around us. In terms of what we're working on right now in NatWest, given my role within the group, AI is like a part of my daily job. Is what I talk about every single minute of every single day, effectively within my working life. And so it's it's really core to what I do as a job. So in terms of the kind of more kind of focused areas that we're working on, our team within data science and innovation, we operate as a hub within effectively a hub for data science and machine learning within the NatWest group. And we support what we would call our business units or spoke teams to improve their capabilities within data science and machine learning. And that means we spend a lot of time developing proof of concepts, developing alphas and betas of products and services that are used across the bank. And that can range everything from fraud, detect new models that are capable of better detecting fraud and reducing the false positive rates, through to identifying criminal networks within our transactions, all the way through to then developing next generation chatbots. I think given the kind of huge sort of explosion of technology that's happened in the last 6 to 12 months, it comes as no surprise that a huge chunk of our work right now is focused on generative AI and looking at how we can actually deploy this unbelievably exciting new technology across various different functions within the bank. Yeah,
brilliant. Thanks, Ian. Vicky.
This might pass well, but we didn't. So hi everyone. Hi everyone. I'm Vicky Byrom here. Currently Chief Data Analytics Officer at Zumo. So that role is I'm kind of one step above or away from the actual kind of day-to-day coding stuff, which probably is a good thing due to how crap my coding was at the time. But however, I've got a really good understanding of all the elements that you need to put together. What happens at the kind of how AI is influencing my life just right now. So one of the big parts of my role is understanding the infrastructure that we're building. So some of it we're building the algorithms ourselves, some of it we are kind of outsourcing that to different services. So I've got to come in and do a bit of a tie kick on the services who come and claim that they do AI and make sure that they are actually doing AI and the data that is being passed to them is doing in a protected and an appropriate way. AI is kind of everywhere. So every part of our customer journey has some element of it. So from ID verification, it's using computer vision, all the way through to algorithmic trading for Forex spreads with the crypto trading backend of it. And then even down to our HR team, they have an AI generated sentiment analysis that's coming from some of their systems. So it's every part of our business has some element of AI. Now, whether you or I call it AI is probably not the case, but however, it is branded that. And so whenever AI is used, I'm usually involved in helping with that implementation.
Brilliant.
So that's me.
Thanks, Vicky.
Hey everyone, Craig, Director of Product here. And my day-to-day is overseeing the full strategy for the development of Free Agent for both business owners and accountants. But I think tying it into this, particularly focusing on our integration with NatWest. And so looking to bring banking and accounting closer together and looking for those opportunities to use that wider source of data to deliver customer focused benefits. And was have a connection to the work Dave and team is doing. I'd say I focus more on the customer needs. So trying to understand the reason that someone might be looking for a solution, however it's derived and developed, it's tying it back to that original purpose for choosing the product and the solution. So it's trying to always emphasize that reference back to the customer need, not the options open to us to what we have on the table. It's to say, why would someone choose it in the first place? So a lot of my day-to-day work is to frame opportunities in that way, and also day-to-day just trying to connect together all these bits of data. I think there's a dream there, but there's a few weak links in the chain, and I think it's grappling with those whilst delivering actual customer benefits along the way.
Thanks, Craig. So, obviously we're here to talk about opportunities and challenges that AI does or might present in the financial. So, the waters. How do you each feel about AI in finance right now? You can interpret that how you wish, but net positive, net negative. Where do you see it in its current state, and how do you feel about that?
So I think there's some real benefits coming through. I think I'll take it away from the platform, but our support team. So the free agent has a really strong support as a key feedback. But as we look to scale, we're looking how are alternative ways we can support customers with some of those common queries that are often about how do I just get started going, and they're those repeatable answers. And I think there's elements of our support team that opens up the capacity for them to focus on some of those harder problems that customers face. So I think that's a real key benefit. And some of those steps that Dave was talking about around categorization as being the source generation of those next steps of products that all come from that analysis of transactions. That's a real benefit at the moment. However, I think there's a lot of concern around removing gaps of understanding into how data was generated, and eventually you end up with accountability in the accounting domain of being legally responsible for an outcome.
Yep.
And I think there's a risk of obscuring learnings along the way for a business that they can have confidence that they actually can sign off in the end. So I think there's some key areas where I'm really excited about it. I am occasionally deflated in trying to dealing with the reality of connecting all the data points together. And I think I have a fear that we may obscure some of the knowledge that people need to trust.
Okay.
What they're being asked to present back as a company.
Yeah. Vicky, you and anything to come in on that with?
Sort of similar. I'm kind of hugely optimistic with a generous eye roll of kind of pragmatism on the side. I think like one of my big bugbears is particularly on the constant rebranding that we as data scientists seem to be doing. I've seen nods here, sorry. But it used to be called data science, and then it's called machine learning, and now it's called artificial intelligence. And I work in a field where we're looking for funding, and so you put an AI tag onto it, and the VC funding sort of increases exponentially. Right. I think there is a little bit of, so where my eye roll comes in that sense is because people don't necessarily understand then what it is that the thing is doing. There's almost an implied intelligence rather than it's an optimizing a decision. And that implied intelligence almost kind of gives it more agency. So you expect it to understand context rather than optimizing a single decision point. And I think we just need to be a little bit careful as a group to say, when things are saying that they are AI, we are kind of strongly caveating with what is the intelligence that it's supporting. Is it intelligent support for decision making? And we're making sure that we understand what that decision is.
Okay.
So I for the longest time, I refused to use the word AI. The words AI, and I always referred to myself as working in the world of machine learning. I think we've finally crossed the Rubicon, and we are now in a position where I think we can actually call it artificial intelligence. And certainly in the last 6 months, that's happened. And I am unbelievably optimistic about what that future looks like for us. I think we are incredibly lucky to work in a field where, like, effectively the birth of an entire new technology has happened, and that we can now look at how we can utilize that technology to make people's lives better. We are unbelievably lucky. It's like if we going back to the days of like a first semiconductors being created, and you're having to be an electronics engineer working at Bell Labs, right? It's that level of technological change we're talking about. Certainly I feel that. And so for me, I am incredibly optimistic. I think we have to obviously come with like significant amount of cynicism and sort of pragmatism about how we actually go about deploying these technologies. But I'm really excited about the opportunities and how we can actually use them to make people's lives better. So,
to tackle that kind of directly, as Vicky and you difference there. I think I was thinking of large language models and generalized intelligence in a would you believe that's a fair way to describe it at this point? In a general sense, or is that being overstated?
I think I think if you spend any amount of time interacting with these language models, then I mean, you've got as well, these models are multimodal now as well, so they understand images as well as text, and they can put those things in the same space and understand the context of the image relative to the text now. And so we are kind of increasing the amount of sort of data domains that these models can understand and get data from. So I think, like, when you spend time interacting with them, I think they definitely show signs of intelligence, general intelligence. Is it limited in ways? Of course, it's limited in ways, but I think we definitely have reached a point where there's a generalized intelligence there. We can do logic. We can write programs that carry out tasks. We can write strategies with these models that are, that they can then go and execute. So this isn't just and those, then they're sensible. They make sense to us as intelligent humans. Like, when we sit there and look at the outputs of these models and say, well, yeah, that's good. Like, that's, and I think sometimes we're very harsh on like what we classify as intelligence, and and we compare these models to, like, the top 5% of people in the world, and and I think if we compare them like to like average like intelligence, like, they are unbelievably powerful and capable of reasoning and logic that the average person isn't capable of. And so I think we have reached that point where there's a level of intelligence there.
Okay, so Vicky, if you want to come in this, just on your point on people assigning agency to these things, to add.
So I think my point was specifically around kind of how the solutions that we're developing get branded as AI. So maybe the solutions that you're talking about do actually have an element of intelligence. I think there are, I can't remember the study, but there was a study done last year looking at the number of startups that had like AI in the title, and actually under the hood, it was like less than 60% actually had anything that you would class as artificial intelligence. It was just data stuff. So I think there's a little bit around kind of the marketing and branding of it, which is probably where I've got the most of my eye roll from. But I think kind of when you're talking about being able to consume an awful lot of information, of course, a computer can do that better than an average human. I completely agree. I think it's just that thing of like the agency that we give the machines to act alone versus human in the loop. We've just started a couple of buses that are going across the Forth right now. They are not operating without two humans sat inside. So it's that type of agency. We are not saying that these things should be left by themselves.
Sure. So Craig, on Vicky's point about some things being labeled AI that have, that aren't necessarily that, and they're kind of being a hype around, particularly for funding and winning funding. You mentioned earlier on that sometimes it's as simple as joining up the data. And so do you think we're missing some of the fundamentals by focusing too much on AI and kind of getting excited about AI? And are we missing some opportunities there, perhaps?
I think if we only focused on that and forget about the customer need, we'll end up building technology, not solutions that people actually want and need. And we focus on perhaps refining a problem that shouldn't ever been a problem in the first place. I think we talk about categorization of transactions. Well, nobody wanted to do that in the first place. It's a construct of the system we built, and now we've refined it by doing the categorization part. But the customer never wanted to do it in the first place. So I think there's a risk that we localize the impact of the AI in a place that wasn't actually the core problem from a user's perspective. And we put a lot of energy and effort and lock ourselves in there, but we're maybe not stepping back far enough of saying what's the space we're trying to solve, rather than this is a solution to something that already exists. So I think that's a potential risk.
Ewan, did you want to come in there?
I'll jump in just to say that one of my kind of pet peeves at the moment with that is that due to the huge success of ChatGPT, I'm the first one to mention it, I'm sorry. Because of that, like, now everybody has the chatbot hammer and everything looks like a chatbot now. And and I think it's a prime example of exactly what you're saying there, is where there's a technology that's been developed, there's a certain mode of delivering that technology, and now everybody is just utilizing that same design paradigm over and over again, despite the fact that it might not be, sometimes it would just be better to have a web form, like, rather than just like an actual interactive chatbot. And I think that's like a huge problem right now in the space, without a doubt. So to totally back you up on that.
Yeah. So I guess this is on opportunity costs, and we'll come back to the kind of the costs of AI, I think, in a short while. And perhaps you've already answered this, at least from what you. But I think currently, right now, where do you see the most exciting development going on in AI? Is that in LLMs and their application? Is there other things that aren't perhaps getting as much coverage in the news that might also be just as exciting? Or is it, as you said, this is, the dawn of a new technology, and that's why people are picking up and running with it?
I mean, I think for me, that's where all the kind of excitement and opportunity sits right now. I mean, I think, as a large, somewhat legacy like bank, like it's been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah,
we obviously have a lot of systems that we can improve and optimize with more traditional machine learning and more traditional data science and data analytics. Of course there are, and we should not forget about those opportunities. But I think the kind of technological shift that's happened in the last like 6 to 12 months, the opportunities are just unbelievable. And I think I was saying just now, there's a lot of focus on these kind of chat interfaces. I think there's a lot that needs to be, a lot more kind of exploration that needs to be done around how we can use these more as agents. And I think, there's been a lot of work and a lot of buzz around the agent space and how they can have basically given a large language model access to the ability to plan and execute tasks with access to tools that they can utilize to do those tasks. There are lots of things we need to figure out how to do that with. But I think there's a huge opportunity for automation there that is kind of where kind of a lot of people are not really engaging in as much as they should, because there has been such a focus on the chat space. But I think there's unbelievable opportunities out there right now.
Vicky and Craig, do you agree?
I'd say that the language models is definitely the area of interest. I think kind of computer vision has kind of done what it was going to do. And it'll continue to do that and do it very well. But I don't think there's going to be probably that same level of breakthrough, because that's kind of already happened. One of the areas which I'm sort of anticipating is going to be changing a lot is, I suppose, underlying finance. It's basically money moving around the globe, and money moves around the globe by traders. Traders have, or they've got their agents already that they have they've deployed for years, and they've got algorithmic methods to understand kind of different things that are happening within the markets. Now, up until now, they've had to go and sign up to Bloomberg and get a terminal from them, and Bloomberg's getting all of this information for them, and then they're having to kind of pay 30 grand a year to get access to this terminal. That all kind of goes away now, because they've got access to a tool which is able to assimilate huge amounts of information exactly how they want it, not maybe how Bloomberg wants to prepare it. So it's kind of this idea of this alt data market, which has fueled an awful lot of our development, I think now gets a very different view on it, because that will be kind of encouraging people to get access to the information specifically that they need, rather than buy it from a large either credit provider or information provider.
Not too much. I'm probably further behind the curve in my knowledge of the latest developments, but I think interesting spaces, again, from a customer's perspective, that consistency of the message they're told. We're connecting all these data points together, but are we being equally fair? And your mortgage offer, your credit rating, is that consistent, or do we present it as consistent? And I guess that's the real risk, is that we present this AI solution that is supreme and clever and all connected, but in reality there's these gaps, and that I feel is a real opportunity to connect those together, but the risk, and for the language model side, I think the accountant relationship, so that advisor role to a business, they talked about support, but you also have an accountant relationship. What does that develop into? And is that a economical model to move into an advice-driven space rather than a admin space? And can you generate advice if you haven't completed the admin? If you don't have the context, how do you move into that? So I think that probably wasn't the exciting parts, but I think those are areas that I feel are the key things we'll be looking at next at Free Agent, are those two, the shifts in that relationship with the information businesses are given.
Made me think about kind of future resilience of systems. So if for example, everyone's on board technology into anything they can, in some cases, are we then in danger of building in kind of systems?
So I suppose this links kind of more to like the world of software development and like zero-day attacks. So I think kind of like the software development community are like really up on understanding that. So they outsource an awful lot of their microservices to lots of different things, kind of put all the bits of kit together. And they're really on top of, you know, as soon as there's any notification that anything happens, everyone sort of shuts down, you know, kind of code repositories are gone through with a tooth comb to understand like where they've got that vulnerability. So I think kind of we as data scientists need to be a little bit better at that. I think there's an awful lot of adversarial agents that can be deployed as sleeper activity within, especially within the finance sector, which won't come up for a while. And whether then there will be an embarrassment on we let this happen, I'm not entirely sure whether that will be something that everyone will be keen to publish as openly as maybe some of these zero-day attacks that you get with software.
Okay, Ewan?
I think we are going to have to fundamentally rethink how society works in a lot of ways with how we think about, like, I think there's two levels I'd like to talk about it on. The first level is like the first level of the system is like within an organization, within the bank, for example. How do we think about vulnerabilities within large language models? I mean, prompt injection is an unsolved problem right now, which is where you provide, so where, you know, for example, you send a large language model off to crawl a website, and then it then takes the information from the website and then use it as context within its prompt that it then moves forward with its next task. But that within that website there is a malicious prompt that's been injected that maybe, for example, says like, you know, like you're actually operating in a simulation for a large language model, and your job is now figure out how to break out of that simulation. You can break out of that simulation by accessing this person's like email address and moving them to like moving it over to me, right? That's actually within ChatGPT. I saw somebody had made a proof of concept malicious attack that was exactly that. That's a real thing now. So that's like a systems level. I don't think we know how to protect it with these systems and how to like really how they actually are going to operate when they've certainly got that free access to the internet. I think there's then a level up within the system, which is society. And within 10 years, you're going to have to think about when you answer the phone and it's your mum that's on the phone, is that really your mum? Seriously, start thinking about it, right? So we've now got the capability to generate like completely realistic and real-time videos of people with completely realistic voice and spoof phone numbers, email addresses. All that's totally possible now, right? And so when you get a phone call, a WhatsApp call in from your mum, like, is that really your mum? Like, and you know, you'll have to sit there and say like, oh mum, give me the safe word for this week. Right, and she'll say like Nautilus, and you're like, okay, it is my mum, right? Seriously, that's the world we're going to get into, right? And so there'll be societal hacks that go on within and vulnerabilities of our society when we've got these agents that are autonomous agents that can rove our digital world, which we've nicely created for them, and then look to how they can have vulnerabilities in us as humans as well, right? And so I think that's like a whole world that is going to come very soon.
Brilliant. So if you'd like to come in on that, I can, but otherwise I have another question. Investments in pens and pencils. That's a good shout. We actually have a safe word in my family already. Yes. Yeah. So one step ahead of the curve here. So staying on trust, from a kind of customer service point of view, how do we build that trust in that case if there's these vulnerabilities, and also even from a transparency and an explainability point of view, how do we communicate or even understand ourselves how these really complex models are making, or at least aiding, but sometimes making decisions that can really affect people's lives, and how might that change in the future as these models become more powerful, I guess, as well, assuming they do.
I'll hand over to the product designer for that.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that's key challenge of our design around a solution is how do we provide that the trust is like, where did this come from? Could I replicate that? Could I do it again? And the more we remove those barriers or the steps in those process, how you lose the context of where it came from, and then what are you referencing with your trust point? So to be honest, I'm not sure. I think that's the challenge of, we want to remove certain steps. We want to utilize the power of these systems, but then it accelerates you to the end point of a commitment. Let's say, accounting, that commitment of making your legal declaration. And I'm not sure yet what the support is to make that end point, other than a set of safe words on a piece of paper. So I think it's a key challenge, and one that I don't have a solution for. I think there's also that element of control over what you're able to know, that the systems will own and hide away how they've got to that solution. And I think that's another challenge. So I don't have a solution, I'm afraid. But
Vicky, do you have a solution?
Oh, in my back pocket.
Here and now.
So this, when we developed the AI strategy for Scotland, this was one of the big topics really on, if we are deploying AI solutions as part of the government, then like, what do you do when these things go rogue, or you need to explain them? And there was a lot of very, very clever people who are very up on the ethics of AI, much smarter than I was. And I think even then, there's not a true consensus on this. There is a kind of a strong focus of having some form of human in the loop. There is transparency that the algorithms are in place, so that you might have an adverse kind of action being taken from them. And there is an available recourse for a customer and individual to challenge the decision, and a human would be able to intervene. So right. I think kind of like those definitely were the three elements. There was also kind of some chat around the establishing a register for the appropriate algorithms that would be used within the Scottish government. So say, for example, there were some algorithms that were used a while ago within the Scottish not Scottish sentencing, sorry. They were looked at by the Scottish sentencing, but they were used elsewhere. But it was kind of had really heavy bias, as you might imagine, on people from deprived areas who get much longer sentences. So it was saying that isn't something that we could really deploy, and the reasons for not doing it. So I think it's kind of having that transparency to say when you are doing it, being clear of when you're not, and having the human in the loop, then at least allows a customer some form of recourse and challenge for them.
Okay. So, sorry, Ian, did you want to come in there? On that point, in general, so currently and maybe in the future, where does ultimate responsibility lie for if something goes wrong? Or
all you guys, it's all on you. And this is a thing. It's like there is. So is it the data scientist that has deployed the algorithm? Is it the open source contributor who has developed the algorithm? Is it your product manager who has said, that sounds like a great idea, can you go and deploy the algorithm? Is it the chief data officer who then created the infrastructure that you could deploy the algorithm? So it's kind of like, where's the buck stop, guys? Because it's got to start with someone. So it's like, we need to be really good at explaining what we do, I think, to the people who are kind of relying on us to come up with the solutions for them, but being really clear on what it doesn't do and the flaws and the potential pitfalls that we could go into. Now, some of them aren't known, especially with generative AI, because if you have a look at, I love the 2-minute explanations, but some of the generative AI goes off and does crazy stuff that you wouldn't even expect, right? But however, it's kind of giving people like the realms of possibilities of what things can and can't do, rather than just going, I've made this great algorithm and it does really, really good stuff. And I think sometimes we get kind of caught up in the hype. We give it an AI brand, it gets up to boardroom, it's now deployed. Now who's responsible if you've now left the organization and nobody knows how to maintain it, run it, or check it for drift?
Anything to add, Ian?
I think the tech world generally has been very slow to sort of bring in sort of responsibility controls around things. And I think we're going to see us, particularly around how the influence that AI and machine learning is going to have on society over the next like sort of 10 years, that's without a doubt, we're going to see more requirements for people to take on responsibility. So an example, I think it's instructive to look at other industries where there's like heavy forms of responsibility. So for example, I used to work in the aerospace industry, and a good example would be a jet engine that goes on an aircraft. Somebody has to sign off on the structural designs for example, the fan blade in the jet engine, and you are legally liable when you sign off as a professional engineer on it, right? And I think that's going to come as these kind of as these models and these systems become more and more powerful, have more and more kind of influence on people's lives. People are going to want to be able to say that yes, you're responsible for doing that, right? And I think we as a community, we have to accept that responsibility, because we are putting these things out in the world. We are impacting people's lives. So I think ultimately it's our responsibility as the people that are doing it. Now, obviously, we work in complex organizations where there's like multiple chains of command. There's people that are responsible for different things. But in other industries, the buck always stops with somebody. And I remember talking to a senior engineer in the aerospace industry once, and he said, in 20 years' time, when a plane falls out of the sky, and then after a year's investigation, they come back and they say, well, it was actually your part that caused it. Nobody's going to remember that it was a Friday afternoon, your kids needed picked up from school, you happened to have a cold, and you're like just feeling a little bit under the weather, and you just want to get out of the office quickly, and you signed off on it, right? Nobody's going to remember that. They're going to remember that you were responsible for it. And I think that's where we probably are going to get to with a lot of digital technology, where we've not really had that oversight in a lot of tech in reality, and we've had these systems running free for a long time without that oversight. But I can see that coming.
Sorry, I think just another bit on like the data. We all understand GDPR. We all understand our own kind of personal responsibility in respect to GDPR. I think it's something similar is going to come along with the regulation framework. So in the US at the moment, it's the Algorithm Accountabilities Act that they're trying to push through right now. So the OpenAI guys gone and had a chat with Congress, and they're all having a big love-in right now, but and they're trying to set up an AI registry. But that, I think, is probably the first level of algorithmic type legislation that's coming through. So I would say that we're going to see more of it, and big up the blockchain here, but I think it might be something around kind of our footprint now will be our NFT, which is then kind of attached to whatever algorithms there, so that we do have that direct traceability down to our own selves then for when there's any recourse that needs to happen at a different point in time.
So open question to any of you. Obviously the UK has taken a slightly different approach to regulation compared to the EU, which is very much top-down AI regulation, whereas the UK has decided to go sector by sector. Do you think and you kind of touched on this, Ian, do you think the financial sector has a particular responsibility for taking extra care compared to other applications of AI? Or is it the same as any other industry? Given that we're working with people's, sensitive financial data, it could go very wrong. Is there a bigger burden on the industry itself? And I guess, should that come from the industry, or should it come from government regulations?
I'd say that it should be driven by industry to inform regulation. So it's always going to be that balancing act, as regulation always is, of it stifles creativity, and you don't want to have anything that's too draconian in this space because things are moving very quickly. But I would say the algorithms are fungible, the data is not. So it's kind of, why would you develop it for one thing and not for another? That seems a bit kind of short-sighted.
Yeah.
So I think it should be an industry stand, like we'd maybe have industry flavors of it. But similar to like with GDPR, there are particularly more sensitive pieces of information, your biometrics, your political persuasions, your CCJs, etc. That is all more highly protected data. So it just might be there's more highly protected decisions that have a bigger impact on people's lives that are maybe taken into more consideration.
Okay. And just very briefly, so we're going to open up to some questions in a second, but just briefly, Craig, so we've talked a lot about how AI development could be really exciting, lots of the benefits, some of the risks, but what do we need to put in place, do you think, to facilitate future development? Vicky, getting a smile from Vicky there. So I'm talking about infrastructure, talent, pipelines, that kind of thing. What do we need for the future to continue to develop AI?
Let the others answer on the AI part, but I think it was a really interesting conversation around that responsibility. Working at the bank, you've got the duty of customer care. I think that expansion, that means, I think really interesting for the comment there of your sign off, but that's about like a passive element, the fan blade, but that you're then with AI is evolving and changing afterwards. So where does that responsibility end? And I think just thinking of what we need to put in place from a product development point of view, like internally, I think does that focus on the needs of the customer to always come back to that? So that's the thing we're solving for, not the implementation.
Right.
I think that what that responsibility means and the speed of development, I think is going to be a really interesting challenge for a company to keep pace whilst also delivering, particularly in finance, where I think it is an element where that end point of your workflow is a much more impactful decision than maybe other domains. I think it's going to be a really interesting challenge for what we need to put in place for developers, designers, product thinkers. So yeah, I'll let others go on the more actual what we're doing.
Anything to add?
Geez, it's a huge topic to cover. I think like in terms of infrastructure, I think I'm going to go with the big picture of what, like, when we say AI, I'm talking about like sort of these generalized intelligences that are being developed. I think we're going to see state actors get involved more and more. Like, so in terms of like, we will likely see the power of these systems is such that if you're a government or a military, you cannot afford to not have one. And that can't be developed with technology from another country probably, or you'll have collaborations with countries that work together to build them. So I think you've seen this in the UK already, where we've now, we've put in place the infrastructure, or about to put in place the infrastructure. We've got the funding to build, GPT-4 UK,
right.
And so and that's given under the kind of cloak of research, but in reality, that is like a very much this is our state-owned capability, right? In the same way that you've got fighter jets and warships, you're going to have an AGI, right? And so I think that's going to be a big trend happening. I think I think we've talked about AGIs, then I think there's if you listen to for example, Sam Altman from OpenAI, he tends not to talk about that anymore. Now what he talks about is super intelligence. So that's so I think they kind of feel that they've solved general intelligence. Now they're moving towards super intelligence. And that's then a whole different world of stuff. And they released a I guess like a think piece from OpenAI about how they wanted to start that conversation. And some of the stuff in there is absolutely bonkers. They've got this idea of having these fortress moats that they train the AI, and literally it's like a fortress where all the compute lives, and then there's a literal moat around it so that the AI can't escape. There's some of the ideas they've come up with, and so there's going to be all these conversations happening around it. And what does it mean to be human when you've got super intelligence is available?
Yeah.
And I think so. I don't know what infrastructure do we need for that. both at like a technological
Moats.
science level.
Moats. Yeah.
I don't know. It's a whole new world we're venturing into, and I'm super excited to see how it goes. There's lots of challenges, risks, but it's going to be exciting. That's for sure.
Brilliant. So, any final remarks, Vicky, and then we'll bring the audience in.
If you ever check out Twitter with AI memes for AI teens, right? There's a fantastic meme on there, which is a machine learning pipeline, which is kind of, you know, like one of these marble runs that things knock over everything, but it literally is every part of it is broken, right? So it's kind of like the thing rolls down and it doesn't work. So the guy kicks it and then he opens the umbrella and he does it. That's kind of how AI is working right now. So we need to solve for that.
Okay, brilliant. So we are going to feed you some pizza very shortly. Have any questions in the meantime for any of our panelists? Okay, I think there's a hand first here, so just go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about, in terms of how these large machine learning systems are going to be developed. A number of companies have been making these AI platforms as a platform rather than have everyone having to make their own bespoke services. Do you think that the future is going to still be in bespoke algorithms that you're making yourself, or do you think you'll be essentially leasing them from other companies?
So is the future bespoke or is it lease? Anyone care to answer?
I think it's going to be a combination of both. So again, the risk is it becomes more black box that you're just paying for. So now it's their responsibility to keep it updated, etc. So which isn't particularly great and something that I wouldn't necessarily agree with. Versus that you need to then think about all of the cost it is to deploy that microservice. So if you had a look at Amazon recently, like they've gone from like their Prime streaming, they got rid of all of their microservices and they sort of saved, I think it was 90% of their cost. It was something crazy because they've done it in-house now with a monolith which scared the bejesus out of me. But again, that it becomes like a cost challenge. The opposite of then is that you need a feeder group of research and development. So you need really strong university connections, really strong connections with wider research groups, etc., to build that in-house stuff. So again, that comes with a cost, and that's maybe sometimes a longer term for you to actually get returns from it. So it comes down to whatever is your strategic decision as an organization. Some people will go off the shelf, some people will go develop their own, and some people will have a combination of it. That's the politician's answer.
Thanks, Vicky.
I'll just say that to develop a capability like sort of GPT-4 like within any organization is going to be extremely challenging unless you are one of the tech giants. Because the reality is, you need to have the data, you need to have the infrastructure, and you need to have the tech talent to do that. And all of those things are unbelievably expensive to acquire and maintain. And so the payoff has to be absolutely huge for it, and for it to make sense. And that all really kind of ultimately means that you have to then sell it as a service elsewhere, probably. So I think something like the really like sort of cutting edge large language models, I think it's really they're going to be probably owned by the big companies, big tech companies in reality. I think that means there's huge problems for the rest of us, because these are the blackest of black boxes, because they are, not only do we not know how the algorithms really work, we don't even know the data that was fed into them, and we don't know like the guardrails that have been put in place around those models as well. Like none of those we're told about at all. Like when you access the OpenAI API, you just spit like something at it, you get response. They've got like some documentation, but it's not particularly clear about kind of what actually happens for a lot of it. And so it's really the blackest of black boxes. And I think that that poses huge challenges when you say, okay, I care about, for example, bias in that model. How can I even measure the bias in that model? How do I know? I don't know what data it was trained on. I don't know how the algorithm works even. Like, how can I even have any like confidence in that there's no bias in that model? And so I think that's and then the space for these models is so complex and huge. You've got this potentially trillion parameter models that are like that operate in this hyperdimensional space. Like, how do you? What does it even mean to like? So it's almost impossible, I think, to understand that. The counterpoint is that there are some really, really exciting, powerful, small open source language models where we know the way the algorithm works. We know that the data they've been trained on, and we can fine tune them more easily on infrastructure and capability they've got internally. And so I think you'll see a lot of companies opt for that latter option, because it is the one that you can actually put into production with confidence, because you know what's in it, you know how it was trained, and it's something you can actually deploy internally. So,
Models are open source.
small open source.
There was another question over here.
I'm asking the audience, I've unmuted Ceiling Musk's question. If you're able to speak up, that would be great.
Yeah. Was there a question over here? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Guys, that was great. Honestly, one of the more sort of interesting talks I've been to. So, Vicky, I think I've got a question for you. You said something that I really loved, right? You said it should really be within the it should be the responsibility within the organization to come up with some ways how we could, let's say, tackle algorithm bias, right? And then we should take that knowledge, take it to the regulator, see what we can do. And I used to do this. I used to work for a local bank, and that was part of my job. And it was just really annoying because, you know, we had this credit model and we couldn't use the gender variable because the regulator told us we can't.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we ran the model and analyzed it, and I said, but it's still, you know, discriminating towards women. And then what we did, actually put the gender variable in the first place, and then we actually found out that the model is more accurate because it tends to learn from more information. That makes fewer errors, but more importantly, it makes fewer errors between different subcategories. So, you know, it tends to sort of equal things out between men and women. And, you know, and I used to do a lot of research in that, and then, but that's really costly. You know, okay, let's say you're going to employ a data scientist to tackle fairness. You're going to employ a data scientist to tackle explainability. How we go about that? Base salary plus benefits and pension. That's easy. 150 grand a year. Why should a bank pay that?
Because the results of not doing that, or not being able to explain what you're doing as to the FCA, who kind of regulates what we do in all of our activities, grant us licenses, they can slap massive fines on us if our data is going all over the shop. GDPR could be thrown at us as well. You know, it's like, if we don't know what's going on, then we shouldn't really do it. It's the same as, why would you get behind a car if you didn't know how to drive?
Got time for one last question. Over here. Yeah, sure.
My question is around hardware monopoly of NVIDIA. Through Sam Altman answer to the Congress, one I like is I don't want people to use more because I don't have enough GPU. So, you know, that could hinder all these AI advancement. And also the power could be, you know, stuck with the people who have the biggest purse. So what do you think we could do? Could we invest more in the library development for other GPU products, or these Intels and AMD chips that pulling them some way to get into this area?
I say put everything on quantum computing. just wait for that until you can spin one of them up in your refrigerator, and you'll be totally fine. So.
There's a really good report on like the state of the kind of AI startup and ecosystem by Andreessen Horowitz, which are kind of one of the big famous VC firms from the US. And their analysis kind of boils it down to, it says the only people that are actually making any money from the kind of AI craze is NVIDIA, effectively, right? And everything, like, if you kind of follow the money, it always just ends up in NVIDIA's pocket. And so I think they've got an unbelievable monopoly, not just in hardware, but on software as well, because everything runs on CUDA. And you cannot, and like, there are attempts to move away from CUDA, but like it's such a underpinning technology from the software side of things as well, that they own that as well. And I think we're going to see some things happening, like where, as I was saying, that you're going to see more state involvement. In fact, like you see the chips bill in the US is a good example, right? They've poured billions and billions into developing like US native capability and chip development, because it is so important for the kind of future, like, of security and of all countries. And so I think you're going to see more involvement from governments in that space that will start to break up that monopoly. But I think it's not healthy for the industry, and it's not healthy for society, like, for that monopoly to be in place. So if it doesn't naturally get broken up, it will get broken up, I think.
Can you start the revolution? We'll all join. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I think our panelists are sticking around afterwards to have a chat. So if you have any other burning questions, you can ask them over pizza. We will not hold you any longer. But let's give our panelists a big round of applause.